I need to understand how all of these things affect each other. How do they intersect? What is good and what is bad? What can I do better at? Because a lot of times, listen, it's not about erasing something. It's not about removing something. Because again, triathlon is our hobby. It's in our life. We don't get paid to do this. We pay $1,000 a year, most of us, to participate in it. And then we just flog ourselves into eternity because we're not good enough. Wow, what a great investment.
Hello, Coach. This is Mike.
Well, I hope so. If it wasn't you, then I'd be a little bit worried.
Yeah,
well, in case you didn't know, this is Robbie. We are the Christian Iron Podcast, and this is episode 291.
it sure is. 291. Coming
our way slowly but surely towards 300. We've been coming to you for going on 3 years here in October, which is kind of just insane. But yeah, been coming to you twice a week. Traditionally Monday and Thursday here for, like we said, the last 3 years, and we cover all things triathlon life, how they intersect, go through our experiences as both coaches and athletes over the last 7 to 15 years for each of us. And yeah, we are here, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
It's good to be here. I'm glad you figured out how to get a room.
Yeah, it's
the new office headquarters.
Yeah. We are not a hotel room, but yeah, I just wanted to clear that up real quick. I had to wait a little bit, but hey, we are on schedule. It was a great weekend. You and I got to hang out here in Chattanooga this weekend and do some fun things and spend some time with some great people. And it was I took a lot away from this weekend. I'm sure you did too. I'm not sure what topic or area you wanted to go with today, but I had a lot that I just kind of took away from it, and I'll let you have the red carpet real quick in case you had a specific direction you wanted to head us in today.
Not really. I was actually going to ask you a question.
Is it about baseball?
No baseball. I've given up, thrown in the towel. I'm going to start a separate podcast for that. So keep an eye out for Mike's baseball diamond.
Yeah.
The hot new podcast.
The Diamond in the Rough podcast by Mike Terali.
Yeah. Not bad.
Right,
and maybe I'll bring in Phil Jones from Pittsburgh, and we'll talk a little baseball. But anyway, no, I was just going to ask you a general question. How's your level of hope these days?
Oof. Jeez.
Yeah, right.
Hope these days. Oh, man. My level of hope. Pretty high.
Pretty
honestly.
High. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and this is obviously a life and a triathlon podcast, but, I think hope is one of those things that we traditionally allow other things to infect our ability to be hopeful a little too much. I think your level of hope should be centered more around your belief in yourself to achieve things, to persuade different objectives from happening or not happening, to changing things in your life. Whatever you're hoping for. I think a lot of people just maybe put in like 20% your willingness and determination and commitment, and then basically write off like the other 80% to just the stars aligning. And if everything works out, then it'll just be, which is true. But I think in terms of being hopeful, I think most of that is on you. And I think a lot of people look at it the other way, is like, oh, well, I hope I can do this. Well, why not just, and I get that, because there's always a little bit of luck, and we're not nearly as in control of things as we want to be. But I've always kind of thought that regardless of what's happening around me or to me, for that example, is that I'm still in charge of how I respond and how I act. And those are the two most important factors in making changes or accomplishing things and being successful. And I think a lot of times we just kind of allow what's going on in the world. Not that there's, things that you shouldn't be discouraged about, but I think, in training as well, like I think a lot of people want to fall on their own sword per se and just kind of get down to the dumps because that's easy. Mm-hmm. And I think we just kind of let other things get in the way because it's easier to allow that to be an excuse versus a reason why you just didn't. And so, when you asked me where's my level of hope, my first thought, I first went to like, how is my level of energy and determination and willingness to want to succeed or finish or complete all the things that I currently have on my agenda or that I want to do. And I'm generally fairly, quote unquote, hopeful with those levels that I'm at. So I guess steady to high would be my level of hope these days.
That's pretty good. No, I was listening to something this morning, and it was talking about how important community is to hope. Feeling like you're part of a community and stuff like that. And I just thought I would bring that up because we talked a lot about that this weekend. That was kind of one of our driving discussions, and I thought it tied in because it's like it is so easy to kind of go off the rails a little bit, and maybe for no good reason, like it's so easy to have things going the right way and then talk yourself into not really believing it. And I think that applies to long-term training and stuff like that when you're not, maybe racing a lot, or you've got like things out there in the distance that you're like, man, what's the point sometimes, So I think that it's good to have a solid community around. And I think that we've sort of founded this whole operation based on the fact that we wanted that, and I think that we've been fortunate enough to sort of build a community with, and people have helped us, obviously, and I mean, they've done it for us, really, in a lot of ways, and I just think that's really important. I don't know if that can kind of tie into what you were thinking about, or we can go a totally different direction. I'm game, because I don't have,
I think hope and, I think hope is generally kind of I think this time of year people get, and I'm not saying hope, in like a spiritual sense, but this time of year, I think people tend to lean towards a level of hope or a focus of hope because it takes, listen, like we're in August, and, most athletes have either just finished their year or they are inching closer and closer each day to the final destination of their yearly expiration date, their biggest race of the year. It could be a sprint, an Olympic, it could be a 70.3, it could be their first full distance race ever. And there is, at the same time, there is this rush to get there, but there's also this dwindling energy, all over from physical and mental and emotional, to where the level of focus and commitment that you have to maintain, not necessarily year round, but for such long stretches of time, is overwhelming. And a lot of athletes get this time of year and almost kind of hope their way into their taper, into their race. I hope I've done enough. I hope this will be enough. And not that that's a wrong feeling, but I think it's just something to note as an athlete that mentally, and I've talked about this on many a podcast before, I think, and even one of the very first ones that we ever did, is that, most athletes that I work with tell me that they are mentally and emotionally spent before they become physically spent, whether it's how they worked in the past. And I talked about this a little bit this weekend, but that's traditionally why I've also been not against, but I have always kind of steered away from these super long 8 to 12 to 16 week like Ironman builds, because does it seem like it's a better idea? Sure. And while it might be for specific athletes, for most athletes, I've often found that it's so much easier to condense the demand into, I can do this for 5 to 6 weeks. I can make this work, versus I have to do this for 12 weeks and each week is, the same. And because of what I also have found with, and this is with different personality types, is the longer you allow something to, or the longer you propose that things need to increase or that you have extra time, I've also found that the level of urgency is lacking. But when you have an athlete and you're like, hey, you've got, we're going to do a 5 to 6 week build, it's going to be really, really demanding and really focused, they can do it. and they could nail it. And they can do it for a month, go 5 to 6 weeks. And will it be hard? Absolutely. Training for 70.3s and Ironman are hard. Training for any race for the first time is hard because increases in volume and demand and intensity are all relative, because it's always more. It's always a higher percentage than what you're used to. And what I've also found is they're much more dialed in and focused. Everything is taken care of. All their I's are dotted, all their T's are crossed. They can focus on it for 5 to 6 weeks. And so 5 to 6 weeks of really, really demanding workouts that are purposeful and focused and intentional, I've often found to yield much better results than 10 to 12 weeks of, but I've got time. You don't want an athlete to sense, well, let's be honest, no matter how long you're prepping an athlete for, most of the time they're going to say, I just don't know that I'm ready. I just don't know that I've done enough. And you have to pull back and look at the entire picture, either for them or with them, to allow them to see that what they're doing is well, or not well, but what they're doing is enough, and they're going to be prepared. And it's the body of work. It's not just a singular assignment. And I think that this time of year, that's why athletes lose hope, or they rely too much on hope. In that, because it does, it's a mentally exhausting and emotionally exhausting endeavor, and I think that aspect of it is what lends. But I hope that works out for the best.
I hope I can stick with it. I hope it stays where it's at.
I get it.
I don't get hurt.
Exactly, and I know I'm being kind of hard on that saying. I just hope it works out. I'm like, well, yeah, that level of hope is also almost like directly reciprocated by your level of effort and determination and output and commitment and focus. It's not just, I'll just let it kind of go and just see what happens. That's usually just a cop out from, I just don't have it anymore to focus. And honestly, in a lot of ways, not all the time, but most times it's also just a release of accountability. Because it allows us to relieve and take the pressure that we have put on ourselves, because athletes put a tremendous amount of pressure on themselves. And so instead of taking that, I can keep working, I can do it. It's a lot easier to say, well, I just kind of, I trust that things will work out, or I hope. And while those are, I think, both still good feelings to have, and I'm not saying those are terrible phrases or terrible thought patterns, I just think you should be very careful in looking on those and focusing on your ability to control and be a part of the outcome and be in charge of the outcome much more than you can be just being a bystander of what might happen.
That 5 to 6 weeks of demanding workouts thing you were just talking about, that almost like creates an argument for sort of a breakup of your 20-week plan, like that vacation we're all looking forward to and dreading at once, where you can't bring your bike and you can't, you can't get to a pool and the whole 9 yards. It's almost like that kind of thing. And I can almost tie it into what's been going on, because we went to Ohio a couple weeks ago. This weekend I was in Chattanooga. I couldn't do my bike. And it's sort of, while it's kind of not bumming me out, but I'm kind of like, it's on my head, I'm like, man, these long rides on the weekends when I usually do them, blah, blah, blah. But what it is also doing is it's creating a little bit of urgency with my need and desire to ride. And I think that is a good thing, because if you can kind of sort of like say, oh, we're 6 weeks out, 5 weeks out, whatever, I better put the, focus down and the rubber to the road and just get it going. And I think that doing that for a short period of time, when you have a base, when you have some pretty good base going, and you can kind of turn that corner and really get focused in for 5 weeks, that there's a lot to be said for that, And I also think that as we're talking about this hope thing, that hope kind of, if you can, it's sort of interchangeable with your why in a way. You know what I mean? Like, if you have a clear goal, you have a clear definition of why you're doing this sport and what's going on and what you want this to lead to, that creates sort of an optimism, and I think we need that. I think we always talk about the why, but I think that kind of stuff just becomes important, because we sort of, these days run together and we kind of lose track of what's going on. It's like sometimes hard to step back and look at the big picture. You were talking about that this weekend, how things look from the day, the week, the month, and the whole training period, and how those things are easily lost in the idea that I'm here today and I had a crappy workout or whatever.
Yeah. Kind of goes back to I think I've used this phrase on the podcast so before, I can't remember who said it, but hope is not a strategy. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times that we use that, but going into, looking at your training objectively, looking at your ability to focus objectively. And, kind of what you said, like, in the past, this has probably been your best year ever in terms of like maintaining maintaining focus and commitment and sustainability for such a long period of time, and not having like as many ebbs and flows as you've had in the past with your training. This is probably the most consistent year you've ever had.
Yeah.
And I think that's come with experience, and what works and what hasn't worked, or seeing things differently, and maybe your why has changed, or maybe your belief system, not belief system, but your beliefs within yourself, or certain parts of training, or what you think you can accomplish have changed. But in terms of like how you look at the final few weeks, or the final whatever, your final block. I go back to that Sebastian Kienle quote, like the year that he ended up winning, the last time he won Kona. He said, if you go into an Ironman fully confident that you're going to finish and do well, you're probably overtrained. And that's coming from a professional athlete who's one of the best athletes on the planet and multiple, world champion. And that, it's funny is that, like, we talk about hope, and I didn't rip on it, but I think it's just one of those words that has like so many different meanings to different people, is that you have to, because some people don't have enough hope. On the flip side of the coin, like they don't, or because I think, hope is interchangeable with belief or trust, or, with a combination and sprinkle of luck here and there, and destiny, or whatever you want to look at it. And I think a lot of athletes as well struggle with that belief system of what I have done is enough, because when you get to this crucial point, in the last I had a bunch of athletes that are doing Ironman Wisconsin in a few weeks, and a bunch of them went and rode the course, and some athletes had just incredible rides and incredible days, and other ones were just like, I can't believe how hard this course is. I don't know how I'm ever going to be ready. And then when you kind of step back and kind of let things sink in, it's like, I'll be ready and I'll be fine. But the athlete's motto is traditionally going to be, I just got to do more and more and more and more and more. And they more their way into, because they don't have any belief and they don't trust themselves, they don't trust the training, or they don't trust the process, that they more their way into going into a race where they're totally overtrained and incredibly tired. And that leads to a very poor outcome and a poor race. And then the immediate thought is, see, I didn't do enough.
Yeah, right. And, that's a weird one.
That's how it happens. And so they work themselves into this training frenzy of, I can't be ready enough. I've got to put in 7-hour rides. I got to put in 25-mile-an-hour runs, and they get so tired and so fatigued, and they think they're recovered and fresh, and they end up going into a race where they're totally fatigued, they're exhausted, their body is shutting down, it is still in repair mode, their taper has been, unstructured and unintentional at best, and they go into a race and they wonder why they flop, or they wonder why they felt stale, or they wonder why they're just not getting any faster, and so their immediate answer is, well, I got to keep doing more. And so they're continuing to dig a hole expecting to strike gold when, more than likely it's, sitting in a safe back up top. And they're just going to keep digging and digging and digging and digging and digging, and they're never going to reach it. They're never going to find it, because more is always better, and they can't trust it, or they don't believe, and they don't see the plan, or they look at things in a vacuum, and they look at these long rides and in warm temperatures with carrying in a huge amount of fatigue, or having this athlete particularly like carrying a ton of fatigue, with no rest days, and putting in a lot of volume right now, traveling to a course they've never done before, and then feeling like they struggled. And what I kind of commented this morning was like, yeah, like you see that, but I see like one of, if not your highest power out for the longest period of time, the entire year. But our perception is that things always have to go well. And I think that's also a poor, I don't say it's a poor decision, because it's not, because I don't think it's a decision. I think it's poor mental and emotional management, in that we always expect for things to go great. And if they don't, then what we think of immediately is that it's a self-indictment on ourselves and our ability and our preparation and our fitness. When if you don't have bad days, then you're probably not just being consistent enough. Like you're due for bad days, and you're going to have bad days. Like I said, if you don't have bad days, then something's probably wrong. Like you shouldn't have like epic meltdowns physically, and if you do, it's probably on you because you probably didn't fuel correctly. You probably had another athlete that was commenting that his run, he had a sensational bike ride on Saturday, and then his Sunday run was good until the last few minutes, and he looked back on it, he was like, that was totally on me. He was like, I didn't fuel well enough after my ride on Saturday, and that's what didn't set myself up for success on this run. So yeah, you're going to have bad days, but it's that, again, we create our identities based on the wrong, an assignment of a great workout or an assignment of a bad workout, and that's how we identify ourselves, and that's how we create our mental and emotional outlooks on how this race is going to go, versus, like I said before, assigning it based on your total body of work and what you've accomplished and all the volume and all the miles you put in, and looking back and like, holy crap, like that's how much I've done this week. Why should I be allowing one singular workout or even one rough day or two to, allowing this bad patch to turn into a landscape of fear and anxiety and disbelief in what they're able to accomplish. And that's also what makes it so difficult, is that you're asking athletes to make these decisions and to be smart and to be objective under the hardest of conditions, because they're grumpy, they're tired, they're hungry all the time, and at the same time, like they're getting closer and closer and closer to this day that's really important. And we all know this from just being hangry or having like very little sleep, is you can be in just a bad mood, and then everything is like end of the world. Like the smallest things happen, like, when you haven't gotten a lot of sleep and you're super hungry, and like one small thing's happen and you just like snap, and you're like, God, this is like the worst day ever. And you're like, dude, like you just, you overheated your mac and cheese in the microwave, like chill the hell out, but yeah. That's how we do things, and that's, so it is, that's the other thing, is that it's a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask athletes to do that. And again, that's like one of the other huge benefits of either being really, really self-objective and looking at things in so many different lenses, but also having a coach or a trusted training partner or a mentor or whatever, is that they can help you. They don't have the mindset that you do. They see it raw. Yeah. You see it as this totally changed, non-objective, end of all being result that's through your own lens of reality based on life, stress, emotions, relationships, tiredness, grumpiness, all those things. So yeah, it's going to be distorted, and you as the coach kind of get to peel back the layers and be like, yeah, but at the rawest form of this, when you look back, like this is still pretty good.
Yeah, it's kind of cliche, that whole idea of this. There's opportunity in every mistake or bad outcome. You know what I mean? The positive reaction to something bad, like a tough day training, riding the course at Wisconsin. So what's the opportunity there? Or what's the positive? How do you see a positive and a negative? And I think it is true that as somebody like you as a coach, and we can kind of step back and look at the big picture, but it's very difficult as an athlete, even for me, to do that, because if you have a bad ride, sometimes it's not obvious, like what's going on here, was it 3 days ago or last night, or did I not fuel right on this particular ride? It's very difficult. And that's sort of why I always like to write about in my workouts, is kind of boring and monotonous as it seems. It reminds me what not to forget. And it's so easy to forget little things in this sport, and you go on and on and on, and you're just kind of going day to day and just cranking stuff out all the time, and you're not really thinking about the nuances of what needs to be done, whether it's it's like, even we went out running the other day, and I'm still really we ran out for an hour and a half yesterday, and I'm bringing goo, and I'm practicing my fueling on these little runs like that, because you could knock it out, right? But the point is to not be wiped out every time you go through something like that, right? Yeah, I can do it today. I don't need water or whatever. It's like, that's just, what is it? Masochism,
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all have a tendency to want to create pain. There's this, like, if we're not in a little pain, then it's not going right all the time. So it's easy to kind of like neglect the little things that could make this whole process a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. But that's, again, like what you mean, exactly what you said. It's why, it's one of the reasons why this sport is so hard. Mm-hmm. It's because there's so many moving parts. There's so many things to be objective about. And that's why being a coach is always, is always hard, because it is such a puzzle. Like I was commenting on athletes' training peaks this morning, and I was like, and I told her, I said, it's hard to differentiate between where that level of fatigue was coming from and what percentage it could be in, because it was the last 3 days. It was last weekend from a big training block going into a big race this weekend, and it was also, I think, the first 3 day in a row work day she had with overnights. As a doctor, just create. I was like, it's just, you can't. You immediately want to see that the workout was a fail, or that you struggled in the workout, without seeing the big picture of, you probably just don't know if it was normal fatigue, or it was a combination of both, or was it just a bad workout, or was it just bad sleep and stressful work that ended up showing and presenting itself in a workout. I think that's something that's just incredibly underrated and not talked about and just overlooked. Is so many times it's not your workout that's struggling. It's not your fitness that is struggling. It's everything else. It's you working out, which gives your life and your stresses the opportunity to present themselves. And instead of looking at your life and saying, you know what, I was just totally taxed, I shouldn't even have done this workout, I was exhausted, it totally makes sense. It has to be a loss in fitness. What it really is again, it's your life and your stress, or your lack of sleep, or your lack of recovery presenting itself through a workout. And so many times and again, that's why it's such a hard sport to solve, in that you swim, you bike, you run. So you already got 3 different sports and 3 different types of stresses and 3 different, body demands. And you have the nutrition that goes into it. So you add that as a 4th thing. Then you add life. Then you add relationships. Then you add work. And how all of those 7 or 8, we'll call them items, intersect. And that's the part where I think we often struggle, is that we all want to look at it individually. We all want to look at it as, well, swimming is swimming, cycling is cycling, running is running. That's all the same. I can treat them all individually without taking into account the demands or the cause and effect they have on each, and that each one of them has on the other discipline, or your life and your other stress affecting your other disciplines in the way that they can. I think sometimes we just ignore that they can't happen. And that, again, is that's what makes the sport so difficult to kind of crack the code on, and then you combine that with the fact that everyone is different. Some people get 5 hours of sleep. Some people get 10 hours of sleep. I hate those people, but they do. Some people have easy jobs that are, 25, 30 hours a week. Some people have 60-hour-a-week jobs. Some people have no kids. Some people have 5 kids. Some people are divorced. Some people are married. Like there's some people travel, some people don't travel. So like that is why it's so different. And that's also why, like, when you look at other people, comparison is just like the worst possible thing you can do. Because again, you're looking at how this person got to this result when the things they had to add or subtract to get to that result are 100% totally polar opposite from anything you'll ever be able to have or fathom, one way or the other, good or bad. Yet we do that. And then we also place our expectations on that and then expect that from ourselves. And we, be damned if we're going to find out a way to understand and be objective in that, oh, you know what? Maybe this is just kind of where I'm at with my life right now. And I need to understand how all of these things affect each other. How do they intersect? What is good and what is bad? What can I do better at? Because a lot of times, listen, it's not about erasing something. It's not about removing something. Because again, triathlon is our hobby. It's in our life. We don't get paid to do this. We pay $1,000 a year, most of us, to participate in it. And then we just flog ourselves into eternity because we're not good enough. Wow, what a great investment. But so what athletes do is they try to fix. They try to fix. Yeah, that was a good one, right? So they try to fix their life to fit in triathlon. But what you have to understand is that your life is your life. You can limit losses. And that's what you should do. You should limit losses. Like there's an athlete, again, I think I talked about you this weekend a little bit, was that he's going through like insane life changes. They just had a baby. He had a 70.3 coming up. So just had a baby. He just got a new job, and they figured out they're moving to a different city and they're building a house. Hello. And that couldn't be any more polar opposite from where we were this time last year. Last year it was steady job, promotion, same city, no kid. And now we're looking at this year and we're like, holy crap, like, dude, this is different. So you have to shift expectations. You have to shift expectations, but you also have to understand something, that when you're going through that many difficult things at one time, that amount of obstacles or opportunities, however you want to look at it, that are causing so much energy or so much stress, that sometimes the greatest fitness you can gain is by losing as little as possible. And that's just one of those kind of acceptance things you have to look at it from, and that also kind of relieves the amount of stress you put on yourself and trying to always kind of keep up with the Joneses. Is that, right now it's about limiting losses, and that's a good thing, right? It's like going into November, December, instead of saying I'm gonna lose 20 pounds, over to November, December, and I'm gonna abstain from all fun food and all holiday fun, and I'm not going to drink or eat desserts. I'm going to have, almonds and Tic Tacs for every meal. Instead, just be like, you know what? I'm just going to try to gain as little as weight as possible.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sure people like cringe hearing that, but like, it's just like the reality of it. And just going back to, triathlon and training, it's just, that's why it's so hard, because there are so many moving parts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when you're saying that, I was just sort of like, well, what is success? We put goals out there and everything like that, and then it's like it just never ends, right? So how do we limit that? I love what you said about you should limit losses, and I guess coming to terms with that is the hard part, right? Like how do we accept that and be okay with the fact that things are moving the right direction, because, everybody wants, if you look down your list of athletes, the roster, it's like everybody probably has different interpretations of what's success in this sport. I mean, in some regard, no? You know what I'm saying, though? It's like some people want to get to the point, it's like, but this weird thing about like, even like you say it all the time, but like getting to the podium, for example, or getting a Kona qualifier, like let's say that's it for one thing. It's like, it's so dependent on the day, the people that show up, all these different things. So how do you, I guess what I'm asking is, how do you erase that from your head? That, like as the primary goal, I mean, it's like, are we delusional sometimes about the primary goal, or?
Well, I think, well, yeah, I mean, some people are totally delusional about their primary goal. I mean, I think that, and I mean, I mentioned that this weekend in one of my talks, is that, I mean, telling somebody what you want is the easiest part. Anybody can say what they want. I mean, like, hell, go back and you know what, let's do this. Let's all go back. This isn't to shame anyone, but let's all go back and look at everyone's January 1st week Facebook feed.
Okay,
8 months later,
let's do it.
And then let's go back and then look at now and see how that all worked out for us. You know, everyone was a, you know, Toby, it was like a mixture of like Tony Robbins, Oprah, and, you know, somebody else.
David Goggins, probably.
Sure, exactly, David Goggins. They're all like a blend of that, and like, dude, like, hello, it's in some of it's probably life, situations that got into play, but a lot of it's just like how hard things are. So like, and I said this before, like the easiest thing for a triathlon is to sign up for a race. Like hitting a register and paying $800 is the easiest thing you're going to do, and everyone feels invincible when they click that registration button. But then when it comes time to the work, you're like, yeah, well, I ain't got that kind of time. So yeah, I mean, like, I think you have to be realistic about that, and some people aren't. Because it's more fun to talk about wanting to accomplish something than actually taking time to look at what it's going to take to achieve it. But yeah, when you consider and look at athletes who want to get to that point, whether it's being on a podium at any event, whether it's qualifying for Team USA in short course, whether it's qualifying for 70.3 World Championships, whether it's qualifying for Kona, like, yeah, dude, there's so many things to take into account. You could have the best day of your life, and if you look at it as only a pass or fail based on the impact that other people have on it, then you're robbing yourself of an opportunity to grow and to appreciate and to be grateful and to be excited for the fact that you're able to still achieve so many great things. Like that is the point. But yet it is so hard to not judge ourselves. But also on the flip side, sometimes it's where we tend to give ourselves a little too much credit. You know, like if things lined up perfectly and we had a bad day, and I'm not saying you don't deserve results, but you know, it's like people who might have the race of their life, and if they end up getting sixth in their age group, will say, I just didn't cut it, I didn't have it today. And then 2 weeks later, they show up to an event with a totally different, you know, category and a totally different depth of the field, and they win their age group, but they didn't take it serious and they kind of, you know, lazied their way through it and they got first. That's the greatest thing in the world. And I'm not saying like you shouldn't be happy with that, but it's like looking at it from those different lenses is like, all right, which one's better? You know, which one do I feel good about? Which one? And I think it says a lot about an athlete, you know, like, because I've had athletes before say, yeah, today was a really good result. And if I step back and see that today was a really, really good result in terms of my placing and in terms of my performance, quote unquote, you know, I should be happy. But I've had a lot of athletes say that I'm just not happy and I'm disappointed because I just didn't have it today mentally. I didn't have the effort that I wanted to have. And to me, that's the most important thing. And so when you hear an athlete say it, you're like, dude, you totally get it. Because effort is what allows you to sleep well at night. Effort is what allows you to feel truly good about what you accomplished or what you weren't able to accomplish and still be okay with it, because effort is the only thing you can control. You know, Ironman race day, 70.3, Olympics, sprint distance, half marathons, full marathons, anything, any race, any endurance event, period, on the face of the planet, control your controllables and let everything else go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's so hard to do, though.
Mm-hmm. Effort is, yeah. And one of those things about, like, what I try to think about is how can I feel, you know, better today? Something simple like that, you know. How do you keep consistent? Because today really is all we have, you know. And I think you'll agree with me that all of us are probably mortal.
For sure.
Okay. You know, it's funny. It's funny.
You, but I am.
As I said that, you know, I don't know if you noticed this yet, but in Chattanooga, there's a lot of religious radio stations. Have you picked that one up yet on your? You probably don't listen to the radio.
No, I don't listen much to the radio.
Okay, but it just when I was driving over to lunch or something one day, it was on one of those stations, and I heard this guy say, it was the greatest line, he's like, you can't take anything with you. He goes, I've done thousands of funerals in my day, and I've never had anyone ask me to hook a U-Haul up to their casket yet. It's like, you can't take anything with you, so it's like, I just think that we have to try to get better each day and put more effort in. Like you're saying, you can't have effort at Ironman unless you're doing the right things leading up to it, right? It's like, how do you feel good that day? That's one of my things is like, I just want to feel the best that I've felt during training on that day. And how do we get there? And that's a really complex puzzle that we have to put together. And I think a lot of it has to do with you talk about these people that have these 60-hour work weeks and a family and all that stuff, and I kind of go, man, I just don't know how they do it. This is so stressful for me, and we've created our lifestyle, and we kind of work to our own hours and do all that sort of stuff, and Ironman training for me is just a bear in its own right. And to think about somebody that has that sort of a schedule, or they're moving and building houses and they've got kids and blah, 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 to try to jam things into that has just got to be, I don't know, an endless a source of stress. And for me, it's like, I think about it, it's like, man, you just have to be accepting of maybe not hitting some of that stuff, and getting to the point where you're okay with the fact that you're moving the right direction and not, like you say, mooring your way to being tired and overtrained. It's so important.
Yeah, it's like, again, like when you go back and you look at it all, I'm telling you, man, that is why it's so hard. I'm sure this podcast is like, oh, well, these guys are supposed to make me feel like this is so much easier. It's supposed to be so helpful. It's like it's supposed to leave with 10 different ways to be the fastest Ironman on the planet. But the reality is that it is, dude. It's like the longer you've been in the sport, the harder things are to find. The harder things are to come by. The gains are harder if you're consistent. Even then, it's like instead of looking for hours, you're looking for minutes. And the amount of detail and the amount of consistent patience and trust and determination and just not being willing to give up, like that's how people end up being great. Is because it's super easy to be committed and determined in the early, because it's like, like I said, like the infatuation stage of a relationship. Everybody's about to get married and life is grand. And then you go meet their parents and you're like, oh, dude, this is not going to work out. Things are, you have your first fight, you have your first argument, things aren't looking good. And it's like, all right, do you want to work for this or do you not want to work for this? Do you really want to make it last or do you not want to make it last? Because if you don't, then you're just going to drop them like a bad habit and go look for the greatest and latest and easiest thing, and the reality is like, no one's perfect. You're always going to have to work. And if you really want something, then that's marriage. If you want something bad enough and you love someone enough, you're always going to work because no one's perfect. And when it comes to triathlon, like that's why you see a lot of people sometimes walk away or get burnt out or get frustrated or try something like totally irresponsible, is because they're just floundering for an answer. Mm-hmm. And so many times, like there might be a better way. Doesn't mean there's a finite answer. And that's also the most difficult thing about it, is it's like you have to figure it out it doesn't need to be hopefully it doesn't need to be trial and always error. It just needs to always be trial, like success and not necessarily failure, but success and maybe not as much success. And then you figure a way to, it's always a work in progress. Like, and we are too. Like, that's why you should never be just okay being where you are and being content, because you're either moving forward or you're moving backwards. And when you've been in the sport for a long time and you continue to see improvements and you get stuck, it's like that's what also separates the people from, specific athletes from other athletes, is going back to hope. It's like some athletes, I just hope I get better. The other athletes are like consumed with trying to figure out the way. And then as you get older, especially, it's not about getting faster anymore. For a lot of athletes, it's about slowing down the least. And so they have to shift it that way, and shift the mindset and shift how they see things, and maybe even adjust their training, or the style of their training. And so again, like, as much as I would say, oh, it's just super easy, I just gotta do this, 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 and this, and this. The hardest part of triathlon is the mind. And it's creating an environment or a relationship with someone else or a community or something with someone that allows you to stay engaged, to stay determined, to be positive, to understand that things aren't going to go great, that things shouldn't be perfect, because nothing is, and expecting it to be is just, you're fooling yourself. Your hope was misplaced. There are going to be obstacles. There are going to be tough times. There are going to be bad weeks. There might even be a bad month. But the point is like, and we've talked about this on many podcasts that are more geared on life, is that, how many lessons have you learned from a perfect day? 0. Yeah. But more oftentimes, what led to that perfect day was a lesson from a poor day. And we all have lessons.
Yeah, and accepting the perfect day, man.
Yeah, and just being like, hey, this is awesome.
Yeah, it's like, seriously. Okay with it. And it's sort of like, and it kind of, to roll it back into the hope thing, it's kind of like, I think that's the thing, is like, when training is going well, that can be troublesome too, because it's like, or at least for me, you kind of, I think it's kind of that old feeling of waiting for that other shoe to drop. It's like, man, this is going pretty well here. What's going wrong? Why is this so screwed up? It's like, it's a weird dichotomy to put yourself in. It's like, if you're not, you've had tough training in the past, and this is supposed to be hard all the time, and now all of a sudden it's going the right direction. Like, roll with that. Let that be okay. Because I know it's because so many things can go wrong training for this kind of stuff, that I think we have a tendency to always wait for that too. And if something, like, it's just a little thing, but over time, we talk about when you start running and everything, and how your ankle hurts, your knee hurt, all that sort of stuff. That's the stuff that used to stop me in my tracks back in the day, but now it's like I run through it because it's going to be fine. You accept that things are okay, and you're not always going to be injured, and some of it is in your head or whatever. And speaking of, like, we're supposed to help people go fast, and that kind of mentality. I talk to you a lot about my desires to be on the podium and stuff like that, right? Like, constantly, maybe.
I'm not going to say constantly.
Well,
but it's frequently a topic of conversation.
Let's just analyze it for a second, because I think that we also talk a lot about addiction on this podcast, and that tendency and addictive behaviors and things of that nature, and how usually at the core of that sometimes is excitement, the need for excitement. And you're familiar with that concept, mm-hmm. I assume.
Oh, yeah.
And I wonder if sometimes I don't do that, because I find that excitement of sort of backing myself into a corner. It kind of like brings out the challenge, you know what I mean? And that's a big part of what I think a lot of people do in this. I'm going to go PR this. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to break 5 hours. I'm going to break, blah, blah, blah. And I hate to say that's a negative, you know what I mean? I mean, in some ways, I think it drives. It's just, I think being aware of it is maybe the key. Not let it overrun your thought process. Because there's some benefit of driving, I mean,
for sure. I mean, it's just like with everything. Like, a little bit of pretty much anything on this planet is probably okay. It's like, it's when we get obsessed with more,
right?
And it has to be all the time. Like, yeah, there's definitely a mindset to that, and an emotional and mental attraction to that is great. That might get you out of bed in the morning. That might make you push more on that last interval. That might make you more focused on your nutrition and your recovery. But it's, again, when as in like more isn't always better. It's like, but when it comes to that, when it shifts to I'm not doing enough, then that's when things become a problem. Because I always get this like, hey coach, like I'm freeing up next week, load me up.
Yep.
I'm like, why? Like, I'm not gonna go shove 1,800 tons of concrete in the back of a Honda Civic just because the trunk's wide open.
What?
Like, I'm going to go put it in the back of a freaking U-Haul, or a huge, massive truck. But that's what athletes try to do. Like, that's the analogy I'm trying to give you is like, athletes just assume that, like, hey, I can take more, so give me more. And you're like, dude, no, because you're going to break. Your tire's going to go flat. Your car's not going to go anywhere, and you're going to ruin it. You're going to break. Your chassis ain't ready. But they always think more is better. So I go into like that mentality that you're talking about that you have right now. Instead of being here's the problem is that more is also just kind of lazy. I'll just put a little more on there. I'll just put a little more on there to cover up, or because more is easier than doing things right, or doing things with precision, or being intentional. So if you're that focused on creating a result, then pay attention to the small details that aren't more, that you're just not doing well enough at this moment. And again, like and sometimes I have to have hard conversation with athletes. Like, yeah, I think I need to bump. I'm like, well, first off, what you need to do is do the things that I've been asking for you to do the last few weeks. And then once we get to that, then we can bump it up. But until we were able to show the work that you can be consistent, there's just no point. And that may sound like callous and hard, but that's just reality because more is, again, it's a lazy answer for failing to pay attention to the details. Or just doing it right the first time, and staying focused and being intentional, like I said. And so again, that's when that mentality that could be a good thing. So here's where, and this is society in general too. It's like I either need to add more, or I need to go purchase something to make things easier. Instead of just staying consistent and staying the course and doing what's asked of you and doing what's required. That's not really fun. I have any more control than that. Like I need this latest and greatest invention, or I just need to do what I need to do is I need to do more. I'm like, dude, just shut your mouth and get back to work.
Yeah.
Like that. And this is the simplest answer for most people. If you're listening to this podcast and you ever struggle with doing more, always getting a new gadget, is look yourself in the mirror and be like, you know what? Just shut your mouth and let's go back to work. That is almost always the answer. Almost always. 99 times out of 100. Just shut your mouth and go back to work, because that's what's going to get you where you go. But again, it's not flashy. It's consistent. You have to be patient. You have to be a lot of times repetitive, and it's not nearly as exciting. But what is exciting is the results are exciting. And I think so many times that's like the most common like misconception with athletes is that it has to be latest and greatest and new and improved and special sensational workouts that gets the job done. Nope. That's not really how it works. And I just think that, when it comes to like that mentality or that addictive personality, you think more is always better. It's like it's a person who has a headache, and the first onset of the headache, they take, one Tylenol to get rid of it. They're immediate. They're intentionally want to get rid of it. Versus the person who gets the headache and they're like, you know what? I can wait a while.
I'm going to drink some water.
I'm going to drink some water because that'll get rid of it. And then 3 hours later, it's like this pounding migraine. They're like, you know what? 4 Tylenol ought to do it. And you're like, dude, just like more isn't always better. Just be right and be, intentional with things. And I'm telling you, that's more oftentimes not always the answer, but also being detail oriented about some of the stuff that is crucial, but that's also not fun. Like you and I have talked about this, like minutes matter. If you're trying to get to that pointy end of the age group, minutes matter. So the tires you ride matter. The air pressure that they're at matters. The wheel depth matters. Your position matters. Where you line up on the swim matters. Your nutrition is the most crucial part. Your helmet might matter. It's like all those things, but none of those things are fun. None of them. But to the athletes who are obsessed with getting better and trying to squeak out every last cent of getting a positive and well-earned return on their training investment, they're willing to go that route because they don't want to get lazy with, the small details. And that's usually what ends people's races or prevents them from reaching, the podium or the pedestal, wherever you look at it, or PR or a great performance or whatever. It's like, it's just glossing over the things that you think don't matter.
Yeah.
Are oftentimes the one that matter the most.
Yeah. Well, and that matters to everybody. Even if it is a PR, minutes matter, like you're saying. There's these details that we can all work on and dial in and think about. And sometimes the best thing I can do for myself when I'm not feeling right is do like 20 push-ups. And it's like the simplest thing. And then of course, then I'm like, well, maybe I should do 120. And then, of course, that
You've been
backfires.
Listening to too much Goggins, yeah, and then you can't blow dry your hair for 2 weeks.
Right. What?
Because you're that sore.
Oh,
you
exactly.
Can't, lift up you've all been there. Like, you can't lift up your arms and blow. You're like, oh, that was a bad idea. But man, I'm getting stronger.
Yeah.
Don't be ridiculous.
That's such a temptation, though, man, isn't it? Man, I gotta change how I feel. I gotta go do. Instead of going for an easy ride, you gotta put in 4.5 at threshold or something.
That's right. I'm telling you, because more is always better.
I'm tired. I gotta go wake it up. It's like more is always better. It's so tempting, man.
Yep. And that was your positive podcast. CrushingIron.com.
Like, who would have hypothetically sponsored this one?
Yeah. Oh, God. I don't know. Goggins might.
Goggins might have.
He's the reality checker. But he'd be like, 120? How about 12,000 over 2 weeks?
Yeah. You just got to fight through pain, man.
Yeah. Eating nothing but air and drinking celery. But no, I mean, listen. We've all been there, or you're there right now, or you're going to be there. So, while it might be not like the most energizing, spiritual, emotional awakening podcast we've ever done, guess what, dude? It's just reality. And, that's what makes a sport so great, is that it's hard to figure things out, and things shouldn't be, easy sometimes, and that's okay. And that more isn't always better, but doing things right, with you want to call it triathlon integrity or training integrity. That's what's important, and doing it right and paying attention to things that matter and not just assuming that, it's like, here's the best example I can give is an athlete who has a run on a Wednesday and just chooses not to do it because they just didn't feel it. And then on Friday wants to run double. The best decision you could have made was just to get your butt off the couch and go run when you're told to. Because now what you're going to do is you're going to risk the integrity of the plan and put yourself up for injury just because you got to do more today to make up for what you decided wasn't right or you couldn't do the other time.
Or do part of it, man.
Yeah, do part of it, or just do 20 push-ups and go for a 2-mile walk. Because I promise you're going to end up running.
Yeah, bingo.
But yeah, anyway.
I'm going to call this podcast The Power of Hope.
God, people are going to be so totally destroyed when they get their quote unquote hopes up for this podcast. Be like, yeah, some are triathlon casts, some are life casts, some are emotionally and mentally awakening. And this one, we basically came up to give you a hug and karate chops you in the trachea.
Yeah.
So, but we love you. And as we do appreciate you listening. We do hope you got something beneficial and productive from this podcast. And I did. I honestly imagine you did, because there's probably somebody out there right now being shaking their head the whole time like, hey, you know what, that's totally me, or I get that, or I've been there. Or when you do get there, you'd be like, you know what, I heard these two random guys that aren't that dumb talk about this one time, so maybe I should do this and not this.
Hey, man.
And if we can help you along that journey, then, it will have been a positive outcome for this.
Hey, we never said this podcast is Instagram.
Yeah.
It's like everything isn't peaches and cream here.
This is like a really weak, boring AOL chat room.
Maybe like one of those deep message boards where
those that only 3 people are in and we're all besties. But anyway, we do appreciate you listening as always. We'll be back Thursday better than ever. We got camp starting, our last camp of this year. We have 25 athletes coming from all over the country into camp. Excited to see everyone and hang out with them Wednesday night, and looking forward to getting in some awesome open water swimming, some pool sessions, some great running, and some just incredible cycling opportunities. That's going to be awesome. Looking forward to see everyone. If you're interested in one of our camps next year, we'll throw a link in the show notes, and you can look into those. They're all halfway full, if not more than halfway full for next year. If you're interested, check them out. If you have any questions about those or anything else that we do or don't do, or the hope that we've just given, you can always go to Mike directly at crushingiron@gmail.com, or you can always email me to anytime at c26coach@gmail.com. And for your one-stop shop, you can hop on over to crushingiron.com, where we have training, coaching, camps, gear, podcast info as well, and I think our archive, swim analysis, you name it, it's there. Check it out, peruse, look around, and, may the force be with you.
Yep. And if you do email me directly, please put Reality Bites in the subject line. We can go from there. All right, let's wrap it up. This is the Crushing Iron Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
We hope you liked it.
See you, buddy.